that awesome? Excited about Daniel and the lion's den and the fiery furnace. It's all coming up. This week we're going to look at the statue of gold and bronze and feet of clay. Culture, it's kind of what Daniel's in the middle of. And what's our response to culture? And how do we avoid it, join in it, become an influencer of it, or just be influenced by it? That's what Daniel was facing on a regular basis. Speaking of culture, just a short attachment to this, parade was last week. It was Monday, and it was such a privilege to be in the community. We had a float with flags on it, and it had American flags, but it also had soldiers' names that maybe you wrote a family member or a friend's name. They sang songs in the float, and then a bunch of people walked behind and carried signs from the various ministries of Living Hope. And then we had 3 motorcycles coming up the back. One was a dirt bike making noise. That was more popular than the float, I think. And but it was just awesome to be in town. How many of you were there or saw it? Or yeah, I saw a lot of you on either in it or along the side. And then yesterday was Dublin Day, and just a similar kind of no parade, but a lot of vendors there, and it was a special day to just be in the community. And Living Hope actually was recognized with a previous mayor of the town, Kent Moore, for just being in the community. So it was a special day to be in the community. And I think is the attachment to Daniel here is Daniel's maybe 18, 19, 20 years old. His friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the way we know them, we'll talk about their real names, are also just the young guys. It's like a young adult group of guys that are going to have some of the most incredible influence in their community. They've got an old guy named, not an old guy, but a powerful guy named Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king. He has really kind of solved the world's problems with might. He took out Egypt. He's taken out the Assyrians. His father was a great leader, so he's probably a young leader at this time as well. And it's getting to his head, and he's thinking about how great he is, but it's also getting to his head in how hard it is to rule a kingdom and how difficult it is. And maybe that's why the world right now is seemingly enamored by 80-year-old leaders. I don't know. Maybe everyone's kind of thinking young guys can't handle this. I've thought about, in America, we've got a battle of the 80-year-olds. And then Netanyahu and, in Russia, maybe these guys just get their canes and just sort of whack each other. That should be how it's handled. China has an 80-year-old guy. Africa's full. I mean, the world maybe is so uncertain that we just want somebody who's old and has been around and has a big tribe of people behind him. What Daniel knows is the confidence is not in the world rulers. The confidence is not in the old guy, or let's get a young guy in there. Our confidence has to be in the Lord, and that's what we see in the story today in Daniel. Daniel chapter 2, I want to tell you about the story, and then we're going to jump in about halfway through the chapter. Daniel and his friends have been brought in to become part of the tribe of wise men and sorcerers, mainly because they're young and they just had a diet, chapter 1, that was different than everyone else's. It was a little bit of a war of cultures, and God blessed Daniel and honored Daniel and put him in a place of prominence. But he's among a group maybe of 50, 60, 100 different leaders. And so this leadership core is about to be tested with Nebuchadnezzar, who has a dream. Verse 1 and I'll save it down to verse 24 before I put them up on the screen. But Daniel's perspective is what we want to talk about today. Daniel's perspective was different than anyone else's, and that would reveal God's purpose and plan. If we have the perspective of God, we can see the purposes of God as we get in touch with the heart of God. If we see it from a worldly perspective, if you're getting fired up at the news, or you want to see the old guys battle it out anywhere in the world, you could be losing your perspective if you're not thinking about where's God in all this. And boy, we have a powerful story for that. Daniel chapter 2 verse 1 says, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, he had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. You ever have that when you're just so overwhelmed with challenges and questions of life? You know what it's like to lead a massive empire, right? I mean, that's Nebuchadnezzar's problem. He has fought off the Egyptians, destroyed the Assyrians, conquered the world of his area that the Romans are going to settle, and the Greeks after him are going to settle before the Romans, and he's holding it all together, and now he can't be finding any good rest because of these dreams. But the dreams are much more than just, little dreams. There's something significant about them. The king summoned the magicians and the enchanters, the sorcerers and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. And when they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king, may the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, we will interpret it. Isn't that a good one? Hey, well, tell us the dream, and then we will tell you what it means. And Nebuchadnezzar sees through that pretty quickly. Guys, you're trying to buy time here. I'm kind of getting a little frustrated. You're supposed to be like sorcerers. I've had these dreams, and it looks like from the first couple verses here that he can't even remember them himself. There's something so significant about what he saw. He's so troubled, he can't quite not only know what it means, but sort it together. And he's like, you guys tell me what it means. And so he says to them, tell me what it means or else. You're trying to gain time, he says in verse 8. You realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there's only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change by saying, tell me your dream. I've had enough. All of you can be killed if you don't tell me the dream. How about that? How you like that job? Who's having bad dreams that night? These guys are now also having bad dreams. And so they're trying to work out what they're going to do. And so what happens here is, let's jump all the way down to verse 24, because this is a back and forth on what to do. Arioch is sent out from the presence of the king with his sword in his hand, told, go kill all these guys. I'm sick of it. So we see sort of this almost megalomaniac with his leadership. Nebuchadnezzar has shown all this wisdom, but because he can't solve this, some people are going to have to die. And his wise men are not so wise. But I want to think about together Daniel's responses to this, and maybe in some ways how his perspective should be ours in the world around us. First, we're going to look at courage and faith. And then even as we think about this, we'll look at humility and wisdom. First, courage and faith, humility and wisdom. And then we'll have one other at the end, courage and faith. So I don't know what it quite looks like in Babylon, exactly where Daniel's room is and where his hallway is. But the king has got his big space. He says, Arioch in the back, take your sword and take out all these guys. And so as he goes around the corner, out comes, and that's why I think courage and faith is really beautiful here. Look at verse 24, and I'll put it up here for you. Therefore, Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. I think it shows an immense amount of courage to go to see Arioch. Arioch has just been told, kill all these guys. Actually, you probably want to avoid him until he has killed everyone else, and he's sick of killing guys, and then you say, hey, if you're getting tired of killing guys, I have another plan for you. As opposed to saying, hey, maybe I'll be the first, and I'd like to have a conversation. Arioch doesn't look like he's quite ready to draw his first sword because he says he goes to see him. And he says, I want to talk to you. Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show you the king's interpretation. Actually, I think as one of the wise men, I can do this. But as he's going to point out here, it's not going to be him. We'll look at the second one, humility and wisdom. He's not going to say, I can do this. He says, only the Lord can do this. But what I'm amazed by is his courage because of his faith. He has courage here. He steps right in front of Arioch and says, Arioch, wait. I'm also thinking about, so I think about wisdom, and just kind of some of these don't fit exactly like, okay, this is wisdom, this is courage, this is faith. They all kind of blend together. There's a proverb, Proverbs 15:1, that says, a soft answer turns away wrath. apples of gold and settings of silver is like a word fitly spoken. He has probably read these same proverbs that were written by David and Solomon as well, hundreds of years before, and thought about them and been reflecting on them. He's a man of prayer. He's a man of courage, but he's a man of faith. And he thinks about his words. Says, Arioch, I want to offer a plan. Don't kill anybody. Not only does he go to Arioch here, he goes to the king. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once. Remember, he's only like a 20-year-old guy. We kind of picture the statues of this, old guy Daniel. Here he's just a college-age guy. He's a young adult. He goes before the king, and Arioch says, I found a man among the exiles. It's interesting, he doesn't just say he is one of the wise men, which he is. We already read how he's been kind of put into this position. He's from Judah, who can tell the king what his dream means. I think there is a slight insight, without overpressing this, into this question of culture and perspective. Daniel's identity is still, he's an exile from Judah. He is supposed to learn the language. He's supposed to learn the poetry. He's supposed to learn the literature. He's supposed to learn the ways of the Babylonians. He's supposed to learn to speak without an accent. He's supposed to be one of the king's wisest men, to give wise counsel. And he's referred to as a guy from Judah, which Judah is the tribe that the Messiah is going to come to. And Judah is the tribe that says there's one Lord. There is one King of kings and Lord of lords, and he is over all. He is over all nations. That's who Daniel is. Because of Daniel's perspective on the world events, that there is one God, which we're going to see in this dream that comes out, that gives him boldness and courage to enter into the cultural milieu and the cultural setting and the cultural conversation. Not as somebody who's joining in the team, Nebuchadnezzar, or Belshazzar, the next guy, or Cyrus, the next guy, or whoever we're cheering for as our political hero. His political hero is God of very gods, and we're going to see that over and over in his response, his actions. It informs everything he does. The king asked Daniel, who was also called Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? That was his question to the rest of the guys, and they said, no, we can't. Give us more time. He thought they were asking for more time. Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. Pause. Not the right message initially, right? I mean, you're already in trouble. The sword's already out. And he says, nobody can do it. Let me just tell you, king. And that's why I love the courage. But it's courage based on faith. It's not courage on himself. Because what does he say? But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, who has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you were lying in your bed are these. And he tells them what they are. He points immediately, before he looks like the smartest guy in the room, he points immediately and says, it is the Lord. It is the Lord. Only he can reveal the truth. And more importantly, he says, and Nebuchadnezzar, he is the one who gave you this dream. This is really powerful. God is working in Russia right now. God is working in Israel right now. It doesn't mean that God is and never is the one who is responsible for the evil decisions of men. But God in his sovereignty is working all things together for his ultimate plan. We can trust that God is still on the throne. Who are you going to vote for? Who are you hoping is going to win with the Ukraine war? Who are you hoping is going to, knock out this great leader or this terrible leader? That's really the backstory here, that Daniel believes through all of this, and God will use him in culture to be a major influencer. Let's look at the dream, because the dream also reveals a similar truth. Verse 29, as your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come. And the revealer of mysteries shows you what is going to happen. It's so great because Nebuchadnezzar is going to take a while before he acknowledges God. But these are the beginning seeds in Nebuchadnezzar's life where he's going to say, Daniel's God is God, and he praises the one true God. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a few chapters. He's going to hang on for a couple weeks But right here is the beginning seeds. He is witnessing to Nebuchadnezzar and reminding him not of a small truth that you can just believe like I do, of the great truth that there is one true God. And he is working through you, a foreign king. As for me, the mystery has been revealed, not because I'm greater in wisdom than anyone else alive, but so your majesty may know the interpretation, that you may understand what went through your mind. Here he is again. What do we say? Humility, really based on faith. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. Nero built a colossus next to this great arena, which we now call the Colosseum in Rome, but it's really named after the Colossus, because you went to see Nero's gigantic golden statue, and eventually got knocked over after Nero was gone, taken away, melted down, passed to your relatives and friends, and people still call it the Colossus or Colosseum. That's kind of what he sees in his vision, this great giant statue of a man, of a king, of a ruler. Dazzling statue, awesome in appearance, but each part was made of different materials of great value at the top, and by the time you get to the bottom, of lesser value and weaker strength. The head of the statue was made of gold. See the value. Its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thigh of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. So you see, by the time they say sometimes the leader, he has feet of clay. He's weak. It comes right from here. While we were watching, a rock was cut out in your dream. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron and the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces. You see how all of it is broken to pieces? It's an interesting part of interpreting this dream, even as we look back on it. The iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all at one time broken to pieces and became like chaff on the threshing floor in the summer. Can you see that? Chaff is when you take the wheat and they beat it, and then the wind blows, and this pile of almost dust just kind of lifts up into the wind and disappears into nothingness. Can't be found anywhere. This whole statue representing all the kingdoms of the earth are smashed by a great rock that becomes like a huge mountain and fills the whole earth. Maybe you're beginning to think about what it means. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. So let's take that real quick. You are the King of kings. That's an earthly term. It's going to be talked about Jesus, and Jesus ultimately the king over all kings, and even this story helps us understand that. But at this moment in history, Babylon is the leader over all these other countries. It's conquered all these smaller kingdoms and kings. So Nebuchadnezzar truly is the King of kings in his day. As we looked at last week, the great pharaohs of Egypt have come out and tried to take Israel and specifically Judah and Jerusalem. And then it says after Nebuchadnezzar came in and beat them on the battlefield, Carchemish, if anybody wants to nerd out on some of this stuff, they get defeated in Carchemish. It says Pharaoh never leaves his front door again because of the power of this guy, Nebuchadnezzar. He's the King of kings. But the immediate next sentence reminds us, he's not the true King of kings. Your majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. Where does your authority come from? All authority, Romans 13 and 14 tell us about this. All authority comes from God. That's really why as believers we obey the law. Because we recognize that the king in our country has an authority that is a derived authority. It comes from God's authority. Kings rule because of God's authority. Babylon, you have a place. Nebuchadnezzar, you have a place. But it was given to you by the Lord. That should give you help when you can't sleep because of the world's problems and election seasons and all the things that are going on. You can say, hey, the Lord is on the throne. The Lord is on the throne. In your hands he was he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky. Do you see how big God is? They were in a day when God was just the leader of this country, and then they had gods of their country, and they had gods of this land, and they had gods of that land. But Daniel is telling Nebuchadnezzar with courage and humility the truth. He is interpreting to a guy who says, I've heard enough. I like the first part of my dream. Let's get this guy out of here. I don't want to hear that I have a derived authority. I am the king and I am God. That is very common for an emperor. He doesn't want to hear that he has a derived authority from someone else. Look at the courage. In your hands he's placed all mankind and the beasts of the fields and the birds of the air. Wherever they live, he made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. That's the beginning of the statue. I think as we looked at the first phrase here, courage and faith, I think in the midst of this we see humility and wisdom. Humility and wisdom from Daniel. A much younger guy here. He'll get old as the story goes on chapter by chapter. But we see the humility and wisdom. He's speaking some really bold things. That soft answer turns away wrath. The king has already said, kill all these guys. Where is it God is calling us to speak his truth? You've seen religious people that are really bold, but don't have a lot of humility or wisdom. They seem to speak at the wrong time with strength, and you can almost see the people around wilting because they're not hearing the words. Nebuchadnezzar is on every word of Daniel. He has the full attention of the king. He's talking about something that has disturbed the guy, something that is applying to his life, something he really needs, and he's actually asked the Lord for a word and something to share with Nebuchadnezzar. I remember a lady that just felt so inept to be able to share the gospel. She always felt like she never understood deep and powerful things, and then she ended up having somebody who says, well, I'm an atheist, and I'm a philosophy major, and I'm a this, and I'm a that. And she said, well, I just tell you, Jesus changed my life. And shared her testimony and said, I don't really know a lot, but my confidence is in the one who made the universe. It made such a massive impact on this guy that was a guy who wanted a war with words that he just met somebody who had a relationship with Jesus. It's like she had the right word for the right guy at the right time. Where is God calling us to be in culture, not of culture, but in culture, influencing culture? Look at Daniel's effect. It is amazing. As a maybe 21-year-old guy, 18, 19, 20, we're not sure, but he is in that age, and he's having a significant impact. But it is through his humility, his wisdom, his courage, it's all based on his faith. So where were we? What verse are we in? Somewhere in the middle here. He wants to give the interpretation. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it. Verse 37. Your Majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the sky, wherever they live. He has made you ruler over them all. You can emphasize, you're ruler over all, but it was given to you. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom and one of bronze will rule over the whole earth. There's been multiple interpretations of this text, and multiple interpretations sometimes help us. It seems like it wouldn't, but it actually sometimes helps us to have multiple interpretations because it helps us to say, maybe there's multiple interpretations and we don't have the exact one. What's the larger purpose of this text? So some of the simplest ones for this text would be that this is, because it's already told to us, this is Nebuchadnezzar, the beginning of this story. We have Nebuchadnezzar. And then after that, we have the Medes and the Persians. That's the kingdom that's going to come. It's going to be a short-lived kingdom. The Medes and the Persians. Well, actually, the Persian part's going to live on a lot longer. Cyrus the Great is going to come from here. And so we could say, all right, this is the kingdoms that follow after. And we're going to see this in chapter 7 and chapter 8 where they actually name these kingdoms. And it even looks like it points to Greece, which would be the next section. And then Greece is broken into 4 different kingdoms. We read this in Daniel, which makes a lot of people say Daniel cannot be authentic for its era. It had to be written somewhere right before the times of Jesus, maybe 100 years before Jesus, or at least amended to say, how could Alexander the Great be known about that conquers the world, then dies, and has his kingdom split into 4? And then there's a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes where we get the story of Hanukkah from. All that seems to be right here in Daniel in these next few chapters. But what's interesting about this section is if we just do the kingdoms that come in order, Babylon, Medes and Persian, Greece, Rome, and then some people said the 10 toes are like the 10 kingdoms either of the future or the 10 kingdoms at the time, or the 2 legs are the east and west of Rome, Eastern Rome, Western Rome, the kingdoms of the Roman Empire. All this has been suggested about this. But what's interesting here in verse 40, we get to see something that changes slowly. Finally, there's a 4th kingdom, strong as iron. This may be the Roman kingdom. As iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, it will crush and break all things up. And just as I saw the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, this is Daniel speaking to Nebuchadnezzar about what it means. It will be a divided kingdom, maybe east and west of Rome. And will have some strength of its iron, and even as you saw, the iron mixed with clay. Some people have pointed to end times and some Revelation markers of final kingdoms. So it goes on, it says, as the toes are partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong, partly brittle, and just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the mixture will not remain united any more than the mixture. So he's kind of telling about the future kingdoms and the divisions that happen in kingdoms, whether it's the Roman kingdom or not. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This rock that's cut out of the mountain, he goes on to say. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock, because what he sees is this statue. And all of a sudden, this seems to be human kingdoms, but over here, a rock is cut out, not by human hands, and this rock comes and bowls over all of these at once. That's what makes this difficult to say there are Babylon, Medes and Persians. He fails, Medes and Persians take over, Greece takes over, conquers the world, Alexander the Great, then the Roman Empire, Caesar takes over. They're successive kingdoms. But a rock comes and destroys all of them. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. This dream is true, and his interpretation is trustworthy. And so, as we think about the interpretation, I want to get lost in this. Is this, like future rock, and is this, Revelation stuff about the Antichrist, or is this a particular kingdom, or is this, and is this? Great part of this is it's speaking about a rock that was not cut by human hands. Everyone seems to agree Jesus is the rock. Jesus is the rock. Peter, upon this rock I'll build my kingdom. What rock is he talking about? Peter's name means little rock. Jesus is the great rock. Psalm 118 says there's a rock that the builders didn't use that becomes the cornerstone of all. Jesus has a kingdom that will be established, that will be forever. It is the ultimate King of kings on the earth. Revelation, Isaiah 65, the peaceable kingdom of Isaiah 11. All the scriptures all throughout point to a day when God will come back to the earth and make it right through the Messiah that was promised through Adam and Eve. Jesus is the King of kings. In the end of the story of Pilate, of Jesus on the earth, he meets with Pilate. And as he is having this meeting, Pilate says to Jesus, "So are you a king?" Jesus looks coy in this moment, as in kind of silly almost. Hey, did somebody tell that to you, or did you come up with this on your own? How'd you come up with that? He said, "What are you talking about? I'm not a Jew. I'm not into your local politics. Are you a king?" And Pilate is told by Jesus, "Yes, I am a king." This is when he starts to take a step back and say, "I don't want anything to do with this guy anymore." Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is an everlasting king. If at any time I wanted the members of my kingdom to come, they would come. He tells this to Peter as well. Why are you cutting off somebody's ear with a sword? If I went 10,000 angels, can you imagine the angels all waiting, just saying, Jesus, just give us a sign. Just give us a sign. We'll be there in a second. We don't even need the cross. You don't have to go to this cross. We will end it all right now. And Jesus, all he's got to do is peer to heaven and say, that's it, I'm done. And he will be revealed as the King of Kings. It is not the time. It is the time for Jesus to die for our sins, so that you could go from this physical kingdom that will one day be crushed by the spiritual, eternal kingdom of Jesus. That is Daniel's message. It's ultimately a God of the universe that is in control, not a man on the earth who thinks he's God. Jesus has an eternal kingdom, and Daniel's dream reveals the greatest message of all. So the question is, not are you an independent, Republican, Democrat, somebody for Russia, somebody for Ukraine? Are you for the Gaza or are you for Israel? I don't know. Where do you stand on these cultural things? What team are you on? You can clearly say, hey, I have opinion on all those things. I want righteousness. I want to see mercy. That's part of Daniel saying, King and Arioch, I don't want any of these other guys to die. Give me a chance. He actually shows mercy instead of saying, go ahead and kill all those guys. When you're done killing all those fools who don't know what they're talking about, then I'll come forward. He doesn't do that. He doesn't have that attitude. He has humility. He says, don't kill any of them. But what team is Daniel on? Is he on Nebuchadnezzar's team? What political party do you think he's on? God's political party. The best one. He sees it from a heavenly perspective. May we have this heavenly perspective. God is God. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. To conclude the story, and even as we turn to communion here, we just have these last couple verses. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, look at this, fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that all the offerings and incense be presented to him. Those are things you kind of do for a great king or even a god. And he kind of uses his own cultural mindset to honor this guy. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries. For you were able to reveal this mystery. Your God is the God. This is not the moment he comes to faith. It's going to take him a few times, which we'll watch him over this story. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all the wise men. You think he put his feet up and said, I finally made it. Look at, I'm 20 years old. I am the guy. I am the guy. Look at this office. Well, we don't see that in Daniel. We see his humility, his wisdom, his courage. It's based on faith. It is God putting him in a place of influence for the next king and the next king and the next king. God is placing him in a place of influence. Where has God placed you? What opportunity does God have before us? Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained in the royal court. He didn't just bring in his friends. Those guys were going to be influencers as well. That's what I pray for, even for politics. Not for this guy. Maybe he'll come to know the Lord. I pray that God would use influencers all throughout. Where do you have a place of influence? The most important question is, do you know the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? Do you know Jesus, who is the King of Kings, who gave his life for us and showed that he can conquer the spiritual world as well as the Roman world? He was in Rome talking to a major Roman official, and all of a sudden Pilate was recognizing this guy's a king. Do you know him? Has your life been transformed by him? As we come to the communion table, music team, you can join us here. As we come to the communion table this morning, so first of the month we do communion, except when we're getting ready for Easter. We do it every week. This is a great time to say, me taking communion today is my recognition that I'm on the side of Jesus. I believe in the one true King. That's my allegiance to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I sit at his table. That's why we have the small bread and the small cup. During this song, if you would, you can come up to any one of these stations here. We have two in the back as well. You can take the cup that has the bread on the bottom. And then after the song, we're going to take it together. But you can stand up as we sing. Why don't we stand and let's pray as we kind of prepare for communion. Lord Jesus, we acknowledge that you are the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. We see it in Daniel, but we see it today. You do work all things together for good, even when we don't understand it. Daniel and his friends got taken captive. Their kingdom seemed to fall in Jerusalem, but in Babylon, they still believed, when it didn't look like it around the world, that you were on the throne, and they acted in faith. We trust you, Lord. You haven't changed. You are the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We take this communion by faith. We sing these songs by faith. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Come when you're ready.